Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Pankaj Desai, the past chair of the ACPA Commission for the Global Dimensions of Student Development, also known as CGDSD here within ACPA. So, on behalf of the International Colloquium Planning Team and the CGDSD Directorate Board, I would like to welcome you to the very first session of the 2025 International Colloquium. This year, we are very proud to present a series of 4 webinars as part of the colloquium. Before that, let me talk to you a little more about our commission. Here at our commission, we bring together ACPA members from all functional areas interested in cross-cultural learning, development of intercultural competencies, internationalization, and student services around the world. We also serve as a home for international members, including ACPA members living and working outside of the US, as well as foreign-born ACPA members living and working in the US. So if you're already wondering about, I'm here, how do I get the certificate? Just hold on, I'll tell you more. If you're wondering about what do I have to do to be part of this awesome commission, I'll tell you a little more. But before we dive into that, I would like to share that here at ACPA, we are committed to the values of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I would like to share our equity and inclusion statement here with you. Feel free to read more about our commitment to equity here at ACPA and understand what it means to be committed to this idea. So, the colloquium is going to explore critical issues in higher education, internationalization, focusing on international students' education, well being, and social justice in global contexts. We have got a lot of submissions this year, and very proudly, I present to you our very first presenter in a moment. And we know that we have multiple themes to address. So I'm going to be hanging around here through the sessions to check to see if people have questions. Maybe at the very end, you can unmute yourself and we can take those questions as well. But I'm excited that we are going to be talking about multiple themes. I'm also interested in letting you know that the Commission is actively recruiting. Uh, we have a huge directorate board, easily 20 members. So the recruitment is on. The involvement that we have here is really engaged, and very proud to share that we recently were adjudged the best commission at ACPA 2025. So involvement in the directorate provides you with the opportunity for ongoing engagement with colleagues with a shared interest in international education and cross-cultural learning. So we are a lot of young professionals, early career professionals. Some of us are mid-level. So it's a whole bunch of us coming together around this central theme. So this year we have up to 10 open positions, and the application deadline is 11:59 p.m. Central Time on April 30th of this year. Yeah. So the application and info sessions related information can be found here in our link tree, and I'm going to quickly share that with all of you. The next thing I would like to do is just get a feel for who's here, and let's all take a little time to introduce ourselves in the chat box with the following information. Feel free to include any other relevant information as well. We just have a template here to get us started. Thirdly, do tell us where is it that you're located and your position along with your name. I'm going to hang on just a moment here, make sure we get started. I see some stuff here in chat. All right, thanks for getting us started, Hannah. So let me talk to you about today's presentation. That's, by the way, the quick slide I want to share with you for our link tree, if that helps, with a call to serve on our directorate board this year. So Today's colloquium session is titled Examining the Impact of Everyday Racism on the Psychological Well-Being of Chinese International Students. And this will be presented by Dr. Jing Yu. Dr. Yu, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the colloquium on behalf of my entire commission. Let me share a little more about this session. This study examines the intersection of international students' well-being, education, and social justice in US higher education, focusing on the mental health of Chinese international students facing race and nationality related marginalization. It highlights gaps in understanding the impact of anti Asian bias, racism, and microaggressions. The presentation covers three learning objectives. The first one is identifying racialized experiences, evaluating psychological responses to marginalization, and developing institutional strategies for inclusive campuses. By addressing these issues, this research informs support strategies and advocates for equitable environments, ensuring the psychological well being of Chinese international students as a crucial aspect of global student development in higher education. I would also like to quickly introduce Dr. Yu and their work. Dr. Jing Yu is an assistant professor of international higher education in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Their research interests include international student mobility, intersections of race, class, and nationality, and international dimensions of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Their research has been published in many leading journals, including the Journal of Diversity in Higher Education, Race, Ethnicity, and Education, Teachers College Record, the British Journal of Sociology of Education. Before we get started here, I would also like to quickly talk to you about our upcoming sessions. So every Friday this month at 11 a.m. Central Time, for some of us, it would be Eastern Time, 12 p.m., and any other time zones out there. So this one is happening next week. Professional learning communities to advance international well-being and success. Then the third session is a state of the CGDSD, critical commentary, discussion, whatever you want to call it. It's a session where we want to get all of us together to think, to share, and to reflect on our current state and future directions. And the final session will be O Canada, fallout from the 2024 changes to international student enrollment and immigration policies. This will be the last one on April 25th. Please take note that it's all happening at the same time on a Friday. All right. So I'll be playing moderator. I will request folks that we hold off till the end of the presentation uh, to ask questions. But if you have questions, you could certainly put them here in chat, and I'll do my best to bring it all together in the end. Or, like I mentioned, if you want to unmute yourself and speak towards the end, that'll be great. This, I will invite Dr. Yu to take it on from here. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your warm introduction. And so I will share my screen. Mm. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to share my recent research on understanding Chinese international students' experience of everyday racism and mental health issues in U.S. higher education. So this is my first time present in ACPA, and also I attend this annual conference this year. So I hope to be one of the members in the following years. First, let's look at the graph to see the number of Chinese international students in the United States in the past decade. From the graph, you can see there is a steep upward rise until 2019. When the COVID hit, The number prompted due to the border closure and the large-scale university lockdown. But the number has rebounded very quickly in the 2022 to 2023, almost back to the prior level. Therefore, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly disrupted the mobility of Chinese international students in the short term. But the desire and the momentum for them to study abroad in the US is still very strong. In the field of international higher education, there is a large body of literature that focuses on the student's experience. There are three main factors that lead to their experience of challenges. First, Chinese international students lack English language ability and intercultural communicative competence. So they usually feel isolated, misunderstood, or hesitant to engage with others in academic and social setting. Second, the cultural distance between their home and host environment is so wide. Chinese international students have very different ways of thinking, doing, and believing, so it's very difficult for them to adjust and adapt. Third, the unfamiliarity of the socio-cultural context is another reason to account for the Chinese international students' challenge. However, I argue that the previous literature will lead to three possible traps. To begin with, these findings, lack of English language ability, cultural distance, and unfamiliarity of the socio-cultural context, will reproduce and reinforce the understanding of Chinese international students as a problem group. In addition, no matter language barriers or cultural differences, it implies that it is international students' responsibility to integrate, obscuring the institutional ability for inclusion. Lastly, such findings will largely overlook the root cause entrenched in US university and society, that is racism and racialization. Then I want to share the context of the study. Since Donald Trump was elected as the US president in 2016, there has been two agendas that strongly affect international students. First, anti-immigration rhetoric. There is a rising new nationalism fostering a political and social climate that often views immigrants, including international students, with suspicion and hostility. Second, US-China tensions. The United States continues to see China as ideological, geopolitical, and a technological rival. So Chinese international students experience constant fear, worry, and concern due to the anti-immigration rhetoric and anti-Chinese sentiment. With Trump's return to White House this year, the situation gets even worse. In this study, I specifically asked these two research questions. First, what is understanding of everyday racism among Chinese international students? Second, how do these associated feelings of marginalization and exclusion affect their mental health? There are two key words in this study: everyday racism and mental health. When we say mental health, you may have heard words like depression, bipolar, OCD, schizophrenia. However, in this study, I am referring to more than just mental illness. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It is the ability to cope with stress, to be productive, to make a meaningful contribution to the community. It's also ability to meet full potential, allowing students to thrive rather than just survive. The other keyword is everyday racism. There is an academic term called racial microaggression. It means common verbal or behavioral indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults. Su and his colleagues identified 3 forms of racial microaggressions on college campuses. Microassaults, verbal or nonverbal attacks through name-calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions. Microassaults are more explicit, including racist jokes. For example, Chinese international students are often asked, "Do you eat dogs?" When Chinese students get serious, their peers will say, "Oh, that's just a joke." The second, micro-insults. Communications that convey rudeness and insensitivity and demean a person's identity. For example, an academic advisor feels very surprised that an Asian student is struggling in a math class. Here, the advisor may be unaware of their action, since these actions are often prompted by the unconscious assumptions about race. Third, micro-invalidations. Communications that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality. Micro-invalidations are more prominent. There are a lot of nonverbal examples in this category, such as eye staring, eye rolling, or avoiding eye contact. There are some common experiences that Chinese international students experience in the United States. First, they are not only racialized by their race, but also politicized by their nationality. So Chinese international students are doubly alienated from racism and xenophobia. Second, they are also dehumanized as cash cows or academic cheaters. Third, like Asian American college students, Chinese international students are deeply impacted by the model minority stereotype. They are pressured to meet academic excellence and unrealistic expectations in STEM fields. So I want to ask why everyday racism is so problematic. First, students will experience elevated levels of anger, stress, and anxiety. They are more likely to exhibit post-traumatic stress symptoms. They are more likely to engage in risky behaviors, such as drug, alcohol, or binge eating. Finally, these combined effects will directly impair students' academic performance, finally influencing their academic success. So everyday racism especially harms the Chinese international students because based on my previous study, these students are not equipped with the knowledge to identify the implicit biases, articulate their negative feelings, and seek institutional help for. Okay, then let's look at the research side. So my research site is my institution. Consistent with the US national trends, the University of Wisconsin-Madison has also witnessed a significant surge in its Chinese international student population. I used multiple methods to collect the data from 2023 to 2024. First, I adopted participant observation during the orientation weeks in 2023-4 and 2024-4. I attended all the events to observe how the first-year international students are introduced and socialized into their campus environments. Second, I conducted 2 rounds of semi-structured interview. So first round is with 38 Chinese students in spring 2024, and the second is this semester. Thirdly, I actively engage with Chinese international students through informal conversation to better understand the details of their day-to-day lives. Lastly, I include the field notes, analytic memos, and cultural artifacts to triangulate with the interview and the conversations. Are the basic information of my participants. As you can see, The participants include both undergraduate and graduate students, both female, male, and LGBTQ students. And 2/3 of them are funded by their families, and 1/3 is reliant on their scholarship and fellowship. Almost half of them seek for the help. However, they don't usually seek for the help from the institution because of the language and the cultural difference. So I want to share the first findings. Answer the first question: what is understanding of everyday racism among Chinese international students? There are three themes emerged from the interview: being ignored and dismissed, being treated differently, being overly complimented. Being ignored and dismissed is mostly reported in the classroom, while being treated differently is frequently reported in the social settings such as car rentals, restaurants, and the banks. Chinese international students as newcomers cannot identify the model minority stereotype, such as the statement like, oh, Chinese people are good at math. So they cannot understand the overly compliment at the very beginning. However, after living in the United States for a period of time or taking classes in the United States, they began to understand such compliments stem from a stereotype rather than genuine appreciation, which made them disheartening and alienating. So because of the time, I will just focus on the second and provide interview codes and my analysis. To answer the second research question, how do the associated feelings of marginalization and exclusion affect their mental health? I found three emotional patterns when the students process racial microaggressions, from self-blame to normalization, from confusion to internalization, from upset to devastation. So for the first finding, from self-blame to normalization, I will read the interviewed quotes for you. Alex said, for example, like group discussion, people naturally group up with others of the same race. And if you are the minority, you must feel excluded. Plus, when you first get here, you might have some language barriers. So at first, you just blame the feelings of exclusion on that. Like, oh, it's because my English is not good enough. I even try to put myself in their shoes. Like if a foreigner came to my country and the communication wasn't that smooth, I would probably stick to talking to people from my own culture. So at the beginning, I thought I just need to improve my speaking and communication skills so people will accept me and I can fit in. I follow up. At what point did you feel maybe it wasn't your problem? I think it was when I realized my language wasn't an issue anymore. Like when I could communicate with them just fine. I could fully understand what they were saying, but I still felt excluded. I couldn't find any other reason for it. And when I talked about with other people or saw the posts on social media, I realized a lot of people had the same experience. So Yutong shared the similar feelings. I asked, you mentioned you didn't actually realize it's racial microaggression. What point did you start to think, oh, that's racial microaggression? Yutong said, at first, they wouldn't talk to me. I thought it was just because my English wasn't good enough. I felt kind of inferior, like it was my fault. But then my English got better, and they were still like that. I started feeling like something wasn't right. Around the same time, it happened with my friends as well. We would talk about these topics, and we all noticed that they didn't just want to talk to us. That's when I realized it wasn't my fault. A lot of us were experiencing it. Both Alex and Yutong initially attribute their feelings of exclusion to their English language skills. Marginalized individuals usually use this to justify the discriminatory behaviors, especially when they lack the knowledge of racial microaggressions. However, when English was no longer an issue, they still felt exclusion. This was a turning point that led them to reconsider the root cause of their experience of exclusion. Through conversations with peers and exposure to the similar stories on social media, Alex and Yutong felt less alone. Many Chinese international students shared a common experience. However, normalization does not resolve the systemic exclusion they face, and their prior self blame has a strong impact on their feelings of inferiority and inadequacy. The second theme is from conclusion to internalization. I asked, you just shared some examples of racial microaggression. What was your reaction? How did you feel? Max said, I felt confused. However, when it happens over and over again, you kind of just start accepting it. It's kind of discrimination, but you almost get used to it. And when you start questioning things like, how could Chinese people only get B? So the second example, I asked, does the stereotype Chinese people are good at math, the stereotype affect you, or you just don't care about it? Lin said, I think it does affect me. Like if I did poorly on a math exam, I didn't think about the real reasons. Like maybe I didn't study the right way, I didn't put enough time into it. Instead, I thought, oh, I am Chinese. I'm supposed to be good at math. So why am I not? And then I just feel really discouraged. And sometimes I stay in that negative mindset for a long time. I follow up. Sounds like the stereotype really gets to you because it makes you box yourself in. Lin said, yeah, it's mostly because after hearing that praise for so many times, I actually started believing it. And then when I realized I didn't live up to it, it really hit me. So these are my analysis. Max and Lin expressed confusion and bewilderment when encountering the racial microaggressions. However, when they recognize its discrimination, it's a stereotype. They internalize, self-perpetuate the model minority stereotype. They associate their worth with academic performance, which made them self-doubt. How could Chinese people only get B? And I am Chinese. I'm supposed to be good at math. So why am I not? The internalization has a profound impact on their mental health. They are pressured into those external evaluations, which makes them stuck in a fixed mindset and traps them in a negative cycle of criticism, amplifying their emotional distress. The last theme is from upset to devastation. I asked, how did racial microaggression affect you? What's your first reaction? Dong said, I felt super uncomfortable. I didn't want to go to school for a while. It was a lot. But at the same time, didn't really know how to deal with it. I know they were making racist jokes, but I really stood up for myself. My first reaction was to avoid it. When they say something, I either ignore them or change the topic. But doing that just left me with all these emotions to digest on my own. It went from being a little upset to feel completely devastated. If it happened again, I wouldn't stay quiet. I would speak up. So this is another student. You mentioned before that you thought it was a language issue. How do you feel about it now? Gloria said, I don't think it's about my spoken English anymore because I can communicate very well. It's more about them not wanting to talk to me and not just avoiding conversations sometimes When I try to ask a question, they just brush me off. I've cried over this class for so many times. Some days I cry really hard before class. I even started hating school. I will count the days, checking the syllabus to see how many times I can skip the class, how many absences I have left. I am devastated because of this class. Both Dong and Gloria experienced the emotional escalation from manageable upset to overwhelming devastation. And in both cases, they processed the emotions alone and didn't mention that they tried to seek out for help to solve the problem. Dong chose to ignore the racist jokes or change the topic. However, not addressing the issue openly led to his emotional accumulation and magnified the emotional distress. Gloria chose to cry as an outlet and developed avoidance behavior, such as skipping the classes. Both Dong and Gloria employed avoidance as a coping strategy. However, they left the racial microaggression to linger unaddressed, which caused a complete breakdown in their academic experience. Ultimately, both expressed a strong aversion and resentment towards the school. So this is just the preliminary analysis of the first round of the interview. So this semester, I continue to follow up these students to track their psychological trajectories. So this is a very brief conclusion. I want to emphasize is, although there are a lot of literature that highlights the Chinese international students' challenges because of their language barrier, cultural adaptation, and stress, I want to emphasize that there is a huge gap in understanding the impact of anti-Asian racism, everyday racism, and racial aggression, microaggression impact their mental health and psychological well-being. So this study can inform a lot of aspects, including the institutional support strategies and how to improve the mental health services. So I welcome any questions, and these are the discussion questions we can discuss in the remaining time. So first, what are some specific institutional strategies that universities can implement? Sorry. That university can implement to ensure that the international students feel supported and included on campus. Second, how can the university improve mental health services to better address the unique challenges faced by the Chinese international students? Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Yu. I think that was an impactful work that you just shared with us. And I also personally think that the work that you have done amplifies the voices of Chinese international students and brings forth their lived experiences, their acculturative experiences in front of us. So, with this, I would like to open the floor to our audience here. Looks like we have the first question in chat. Seem to be less interviews during the spring. Is that because they haven't been conducted yet, or did students leave the institution?
So because the first round of the interview, I conducted 38 interview with the students, and the second round is still ongoing. I have only completed 6 interviews, and I only tracked the 31. So 7 students. There are a lot of reasons. First of the reason they went back to China. So there's less impact of the United States context influenced them. So I just let them quit. And the second reason is some students didn't respond. So I also lose some of the students.
Thank you. Do you have other questions from the audience members? Feel free to drop it in chat or Mute yourself. Okay, I'm going to come in as people think. Oh, Tina, thank you. I can hold off my question. Tina, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. Oh, hi. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm on my mobile. I was commuting over here in California, getting to the office. But thank you.
Please go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
So you are muted.
Okay, can you hear? I apologize.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I was commuting, so I'm actually on my phone. In California, it's like 9:30. Um, Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Yu. Actually, I wanted to just bring you had a discussion question about what universities can do. And at the University of San Francisco, we had implemented for the first time a course in understanding racism in the United States for international students specifically. And we've ran it a couple times. It is a elective course, so we can't force students to take it. But this was a way for us to kind of address the the incidents, the anti-Asian hate and Black Lives Matters. That was around the time that after all those things were coming up and international students had questions. This is when um, our our assistant vice provost was like, "Hey, this is a course." We worked with a professor to kind of build that course out for international students. And I think what is it's not only addressing what's going on in the United States, but I really appreciate how your research is linking it to like the mental health and well-being of international students, right? So the course, while we are thinking, oh yes, it should address the things that are going on, help our students understand what's the culture of the racialization in the United States. At the same time, it's um, it's good to know to hear your research and to try to continue building support and advocacy for that class and and future programs like that because of the way it also affects their mental health and well-being, and I'm sure from your research other aspects of the Chinese students well-being. So I just wanted to share that as one of the possibilities. I mean, not all programs or schools are able to do something like this. We actually had it was some kind of like project grant. I wasn't a part of it, so I'm not sure, but I'm really, really proud of that kind of course that we have because it isn't something you see often. And so I believe it's on our website somewhere, but if anyone's interested, but thank you for furthering kind of that meaning, like the meaningfulness of what we are doing too.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And so this is, I think in the United States, California is very unique, and they do things more forward than other states. So because I'm doing the research on the Chinese international students, and I think when they come to the United States day one, this is a very critical time for the international students to learn something like race and racism because this knowledge is not there for them. And from my research, you can see that international students are not equipped with the knowledge to identify the racial microaggression because they were not born or raised here. So they usually will take that as a compliment, will take that as a lot of racial microaggression are not negative, are very positive, but they cannot tell. So based on my research, I strongly recommend that the university can incorporate the content of race and racism in their orientation because I think this is very important when the international students come to the United States. However, a lot of the leaders, they implicitly let me know that international student is kind of a commodity. They don't want the international students feel they will experience the racism and racialization in their study. So they will not have the content in the orientation or the workshop. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. I do realize that you had two discussion questions out, and I was wondering if you would like for us to look at it again, think a little more, and respond to that. Maybe that could help prompt some questions in people's minds, or responses to these discussion questions are also very welcome. For those of us who are not looking at the screen, what are some specific institutional strategies that universities can implement to ensure that international students feel supported and included on campus? That's the first question. The second one is, how can universities improve mental health services to better address the unique challenges faced by Chinese international students?
Yes, I would like to intervene. I did some research in the past, actually for one of my comprehensive exam question, try to understand how multicultural education is not heavily intersected with international education. So how racial discourses are not embedded in the international education research or frameworks. So I came to the understanding that it's it's an issue, it's a problem, and I propose some ideas to how to improve that. For example, I was reflecting on my institution. We have an international office and the multicultural education, the multicultural office. And the multicultural office offers a lot of workshop on race, microaggression, racial biases, or insults, but they're mainly targeting minorities in the US, which is, great. But at least in my institution, I see not as much connection between these two offices, that they could work very well together to provide more workshops or opportunities to learn about, to international students, to learn about how race operates in the US, because many of the students, and also in particular, Chinese international students, represent the majority of, racial majority in their country, but they come to the US and suddenly they are part of the racial minority, and are often identified more as Asian American in some cases. So there is even another layer of complexity that they may not face. So maybe having some workshop on even understanding how identity, social identity is constructed, reflecting on how, again, race operates in the US, how they can be affected, because it's a real problem. And, I work in international office as a graduate assistant, so I have a lot of this conversation with my fellow international students to navigate these issues. So I'm very impressed by the research, and that was like a little bit my thought in this regard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I want to emphasize one thing is international students are not only because most of them are colored people, so they are the minorities in the United States. However, these international students from the country, and and the international students themselves are, because they are mobile, they kind of is a elite group, so they can go to one country to study abroad, right? And they bring a lot of the pre migration ideas in their country, so it's very different from the United States, the racial pyramid, but they also have many prejudice and the racist ideas towards the minorities in the United States. So in my previous research, I find the Chinese international students have the prejudice and biases against the Black students. So if they don't are educated by the equity, diversity, and the inclusion, the ideas about how to make the world equitable. So I think this is a very necessary that U.S. university should educate the international students. Not only they need to protect themselves, but also I don't want them to be the part of the structure to reinforce and perpetuate the racial inequalities in the future.
Good point there. Thank you. I would like to quickly bring forth the comments that we have received here in chat. Earlier, Hannah mentioned that I really think mental health resources on campus need also training in multicultural competency, especially from a lens of cultural humility. I think there is a lot of discussion of assimilation from the students' end and not how we can work to be better hosts to international students. Similarly, here we have an add on from Tina, who says, wholly agree that multicultural education and international education both coverage and diverge, or both converge and diverge, sorry. Institutional strategies should address both. Any further thoughts? A question for you, Dr. Yu. Did your research uncover any differences in students experiencing racial microaggressions based on the intersection of their identities?
Mm, what kind of identity you mentioned, you specifically referred to?
Right. I'm imagining, gender could be one of it. Sometimes it is affiliation with a certain tribe, um, ability to be bilingual, multilingual, all of that can play into. And sometimes I know that mere adoption to the English language alone can make a big difference. So those who can speak language, the English language at a higher proficiency might face possibly lesser racism or perceived to feel be judged less on their ability to speak English, things like that I have seen in research. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So because all my study is based on my dissertation, so my dissertation is just focused on the Chinese and international undergraduate students. This group of students are very, very unique because so the in the United States, undergraduate students will pay their tuition and living expenses, which means they are self-funded by their families. And these students and the American higher education is very, very expensive. International students need to pay 3 times more than the domestic students. So um, and you can see that this group of international students are very elite. So in their country, no matter in their country or around the world, they are the elite students, no matter the academic level or the financial level. So I'm doing a research on the intersectionality to see the race and the class. And I haven't been researched on the gender yet because the class will be more salient for the undergraduate students. And I find international students are very, very interesting because they hold inconsistent two social status. On the one hand, they are the elites. They have the financial resources. They can go back and forth. They are very free. They are flexible citizens. However, they are racialized. And they are racialized because they are color, they are from Asian countries, they are minorities in the United States. So you can see the two inconsistent, incongruent social status in one group. So I call it transnational racial elites. And these inconsistency will affect a lot of things. For example, when in the COVID-19, we can see there are sweeping anti-Asian racial movements, Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian hate. So I will ask the question, so how do you see the racial justice movements happening outside? And these elite students will tell me that, they will not engage. If the United States have a lot of racism, they can go to Canada, they can go to Australia, they can go to UK. So you can see the class did affect how they perceive the class struggle and the racial justice movements. And I think this is very important. They are not only the racial minority group, but also they have their status.
That sounds great. As you were talking, I was reflecting on the timeliness of this study and knowing that, this is a multi-stage study. I wonder how much of a change or perhaps a greater echoing and amplification of the same you would find in the latter half of your study, given the change in administration, given the change in or the amplification in the rhetoric, things like that. So I feel like you certainly are shedding light on something very vital here, coming from a lens of global support for diverse students. I feel like this matters a lot. I have a quick question for you as you're talking about mental health. What are your thoughts on the self-efficacy of Chinese students, maybe even behaviors related to mental health seeking, support seeking, and their own inhibition towards it, or a certain mindset change that might be happening in mainland China, things like that?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. So mental health services are emerging in mainland China because it's not fully developed like the United States. So Chinese international students are more and more inclusive and willing to seek out for help compared to the old generation. However, there is one thing that so I asked the Chinese international students, if you feel depressed, if you feel anxious and worried, will you seek out for the mental health services? They say, so the answer is yes. However, there are a lot of issues about how to assess the mental health services. First, in the United States, because they're students and the services are free, they're willing to take it. So it's not like a lot of literature says there is a stigma and students are unwilling to seek out for the mental health services. It's no. They say they were willing to. However, the mental service is there's a lacking staff issue. So it's very difficult to make an appointment. So in our university, we give additional barriers. First, you need to call and you make an appointment. You know, the international students are not good at very good at language, especially when they just arrived. So this is additional barriers. So they can only after making a call to schedule the services, and then they can do the in-person services. And this is the schedule for all the students. So this is the first additional barriers. And the second barriers is, so the most mental health providers are not minority background. So they usually lack the culturally responsive strategies to help the international students. They have no idea about the background, the cultural practices about the international students. And this is the very key issue. One student told me that the white mental health provider asked her to take a shower, and she said it's totally no use. So I feel there's a lot of discrepancies between the students' needs and the institutional support.
Great. I think you raised a vital point there, which is the need for greater diversity in the mental health providers. Oftentimes, that cultural competence and cultural humility that is needed to talk to, even forget advising, counseling, is kind of missing from time to time. My own research has shown me that as well. So I'm curious, as related to your work once again, is there any insight that you would like to share with us when it comes to the racism that students from China face when it comes to the world of work? I'm in career services, and I do see that, today, given the politics and the, general rhetoric out there, it seems that many of these worlds are colliding. A conversation about work quickly transforms itself into a conversation or more like an accusation of espionage, of racism, of some sort of subservience of thought and things like that. So to me, it seems like all of these have got muddied, and I would really be interested in seeing how our students perceive it. You know, just this morning I was reading, and to elaborate a little, Indian students last year were supposed to have been once again, after a decade and a half ish, the number one international students coming to the US, only to be last year once again see a huge fall in their numbers. And so some people had pointed out to that, but the recent analysis of SEVIS numbers have pointed to the fact that Chinese students have remained stable. Indian students have dropped out as much as 27%. Some of it is alluded to the change in visa regime, so to say. But there's also an inclination towards the hypotheses, I might call it that, that maybe Indian international students are weighing the pros and cons of international education in the US much more than before, given the climate here in the United States. So much, Pravesh, to come back to you and say, what is your perspective on the views of Chinese students when it comes to the world of work?
Mm. Yeah, your instinct is totally right, because so the Chinese international students experience racism not only based on their racial identity but also their national identity. So you can see a lot of issues are intersectional. So the racism, xenophobia, and the politicization. So all the things come together, especially U.S.-China geopolitical tension. That is a huge role in playing to dehumanizing the international students. So this is not undergraduate students. This is graduate students. So most graduate students, they will be so in the past, the stereotype is the cheap labor. They will provide their intellectual talents to serve the United States higher education. But now they more and more dehumanize as the espionage, academic thefts, academic cheaters, spies. So especially when you go through the customs, so they will deny you without no reasons. So in my another study I just presented yesterday, so to see how those geopolitical tensions that impact Chinese international students' decision making. So I can tell you some coping strategies that they have. If the students are major in very sensitive major, for example, AI, for example, computer science, these students told me once they decided to come to the United States, they will stay here until they graduate. So they want risk. They want they, because the international students will visit home and to get more support from their family. However, they want to sacrifice for their international higher education, especially under the geopolitical tensions. They don't want to risk to be forced to quit. So they if they their PhD is like 5 to 6 years, they will stay in the United States until their graduation. That's very sad. And the second is more and more students will consider the value of international education, because the whole world is going through the economic downturn. And the more and more people are very worried about the investment and the return from the international higher education. So a lot of Chinese students will tell me that they will consider the countries or region closer to mainland China. So which is the Hong Kong and Singapore will emerge as the destination country or regions for the international student to study abroad.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Yu. I believe that we are very close to the end of our time here. I hope people are continuing to think about it. The questions are forming in your minds. And with Dr. Yu's permission, I'll invite all of you to stay in touch with your work. And if you feel like you want to further this conversation, Dr. Yu, if you want to, you could also share your email here in chat. That way, people may connect with you directly. At this point in time, I will quickly go ahead and share my screen once again. All right, so that was Dr. Yu today. A quick reminder that we have another one coming up next Friday, the April 11th, on professional learning communities to advance international well-being and success. Dr. Ali Watts and Sayora from Bowling Green State University. So at this point in time, we would also like to remind everyone that we are not done. We have so many more sessions coming up, as you see on the screen. For those of us who are joining us a little later than the start time. All right. This is also where I remind myself to once again thank Dr. Yu for their time, their insights. What a vital topic and what an interesting perspective on the globalization and the deconstruction of that globalization as we are seeing unfold in front of us. So, as people are beginning to ponder on these topics, I would encourage you to attend the rest of our sessions. We also would like to encourage you to attend all of them. But if you were to attend 3 out of 4 sessions in our colloquium, you would be able to receive a certificate of completion. It's an e-certificate. We will send it to your emails that you use to register, and this can proudly be displayed on your social networks and shared within your professional networks. So the last date to sign up for this certificate is the 30th of April. That is the end of this month by the end of the day. Okay, and then I'll quickly share with all of us here the relevant links. Make sure you are signing up. It's very important that you complete the form to receive a certificate. And just a reminder that you'll need to do it after each session. Some people might think it's a little repetitive, but it helps us track your attendance as well as your interest. So if you could do it, that would be very helpful. So once again, thank you, everyone. It was great to have you all. Let's continue this discussion and further it within our own communities. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.